I'd made the Maybe-Gravies as a special EP to commemorate and celebrate the 5th anniversary of my debut album, The Graveyard of Maybe Somethings. And it's a 3-track EP, and all of the songs are remasters of 3 of my favorite songs from that album that I felt deserved a little bit more of a special spotlight and maybe a little bit more of a polish as well, just using some of the production techniques that I've learned over the last 5 years. And yeah, the 5th anniversary coming up felt like the right occasion to do something that I kind of wanted to do for a little while anyway, because although I always loved those songs, over the years I kind of felt like there were some things that I wanted to modify about them slightly, and those were the things that I'd focused on when I was working on this EP. All of the artwork on both the original album and this new EP was done by my co-pilot in Perpetual Mischief, Bex, who 5 years ago had originally drawn the artwork by hand and had to redraw it multiple times to correct any little mistakes and whatnot, or any imperfections that they were not really stoked on at the time, which of course is a colossal pain in the neck if you're drawing something by hand, pen and paper, etc. And so the parallel as well between the development of the music and the development of the art was that since then Bex has also gone fully digital with their art. So instead of having to redraw and retrace things on paper and pen, they could now basically import the original drawing and then trace it over in Procreate on the iPad and just tweak it to their heart's content. And so that's what we ended up doing. So it's kind of a cool parallel collaboration of like, here's how it was back then, and then here's how it is now, using the techniques that we both evolved while honing our respective crafts. The original idea for Your Beloved Scapeghost was something that just popped into my head one morning. I distinctly recall it was my day off and it was like a beautiful sunny fall afternoon, and I went to go on a solo walk in this riverside park near where I lived at the time in Calgary. And while lurking amongst all the shrubbery and the trees and whatnot, I just had this idea that just popped in for the lead melody and just like some of the initial guitar chugs, and it kind of just snowballed from there, especially once I got home soon after that and loaded up Ableton and started mucking around with some of the ideas. I did save some of those initial MIDI riff ideas as well, which is pretty rare for me to kind of have a separate session of just the original ideas and then kind of resave it and then start adding all the other stuff to it. But it was kind of cool to find that while I was digging through the old hard drives trying to find some of these old files. This is the MIDI that I'd saved for Scapeghost. I don't have the original synth that played them anymore, so I just loaded up kind of a generic patch from something that I currently have. But essentially it's the 4 original ideas that, if you've heard the song, will sound very familiar. The guitars play pretty much all of these parts, and the synths that play these are also layered in with the guitars. So this is the bit. Quick bit of trivia, that last riff with all the swing to it is actually what the lead guitars are doing in the finished version, but I took out the swing. It's just more straight 16th notes or whatever it is. But this is the idea that I originally had, and the swingy sort of bouncy nature of it didn't really fit the feel of the rest of the song, but I still wanted to just kind of leave it in, which is why it comes in right at the very end of the track. But yeah, the notes are the same as to what's being played by the leads. It's just a different feel. Yeah, it was definitely one of my earlier forays into combining metal drum and bass with like psy-esque music and stuff. I guess around the same time that the original idea popped into my head, I became enamored with this really fancy, high-end Nashville Telecaster at this music store that I worked at the time, and it was way out of my price range, and like I could never afford it. But I did get a chance to rent it for a couple days, which was awesome, because then I took it home and got to lay down some like clean riffs and stuff on it, because like those pickups sounded unreal, and it was just a really nice guitar to play and stuff. And so all of those ideas ended up making it into the early session of Scapeghost, and having combined the synths and all the MIDI and like the angry guitar chugs with like those cool clean riffs was how the song really started to kind of come together after a little while. And yeah, it was just neat to use this fancy instrument that was completely out of my league on a song I was working on. As far as what's different with the remaster versus the original version, one thing that always kind of bugged me was the sound of the kick. In the original version, it kind of felt a little overbearing at times, and it also felt too forward in your face. So I wanted to kind of subdue it a little bit, blend it better, and ultimately just replace it with a different sample altogether, at least for like the more drum and bassy sections. I still kept it in the more sigh part of the song just because it fit a lot better with that section, but everything else, yeah, I just wanted to use a different kick. Some of the other things that I also changed more notably was just bringing some of the guitar, like the heavy guitars especially, more forward into the mix, because they felt a little bit buried in the original and stuff. And other than that, it's really just a better blending of all the elements. Poofball Ferocity Bush. So the original idea for the title, and subsequently the instrumentation and everything that went into the song, spawned from this drawing challenge that Bex and I would do. So we'd basically pitch some ridiculous idea to one another, and then we just had to draw it and just kind of compare whose rendition was more amusing. And so as part of that challenge, I pitched the idea of like a poofball ferocity bush. Like draw this weird, horrifying, mischievous alien bush creature that would like skulk around and prey on things and just like get up to no good. I don't know. And deliver Bex did. It was one of our earlier artwork collaborations that we did. So they drew it all on with pen and paper, and then I imported it into Photoshop and just added a bunch of like final polish and all the little details and made it look like a weird old, I don't know, like a postcard or something. Around that time, I was playing quite a few gigs with my friends Tanner and Callie, who go by Callie Yuga and the Genesis Project. I'm actually wearing the Genesis Project shirt. They were a pretty known local DJ duo, and I would often round out the repertoire with live guitars and synths and samplers and stuff like that. And then eventually they also started playing more live guitar and things, and yeah, we played a bunch of festivals together, and it was always a blast. But around that time, their sets included a lot of bass heavy psytrap music, so I wanted to make a song that would actually fit within that set list, and then that way, as part of my original music that I would bring into their sets, I would just have more to contribute to it, kind of thing. So that's what I was really aiming for with Poofball, and it turned out to be a really awesome track to play live. Like, it was one of our favorites to play together, which is always super rad. One of my favorite parts of it is the spicy acoustic breakdown with an added cajon that I recorded. The only catch, though, is that in the original, that section kind of drew out a little bit too long, so that was one of the changes. In the remastered version was I just kind of cut it in half, which is something that I've already been doing for a number of years within the scope of my live sets, just because, you know, you want things to flow nicely, and yeah, that section just was a little bit too stretched out, I felt. So yeah, cut it back, and now it's kind of the version that I felt it always wanted and needed to be. The other thing that I really dig about it was the handcrafted percussion, because I spent a lot of time, especially during the drop section, really tweaking all these different drum samples and all these sort of wooden blocks, and there were bits of broken glass and like things like that I meshed together to make the drum kit, essentially. And the other thing was at the very, very end, the shaker was actually recorded by Bex. That was our first musical sort of collaboration. Yeah, and they were really, really nervous to do the shaker bit on the recording, but it turned out pretty good. Even like at the very end, like how the song ends is like the shaker got rolled around in front of the microphone, and that's sort of like how it fades out, that was kind of neat. Yeah, this is the percussion section of the drop in Poofball. I unfortunately don't have the session with the original samples or anything anymore, so this is just the bounced out drum stem from the original track. Yeah, this will just kind of give you an idea as to all of the various little layering things that went into the drums and the percussion of that song. So here it is. a lot of overhead work, a lot of metal influence, even in the arrangement of the drums, as you no doubt can tell. So Viable Pouncing Project is a song that is very special to me, and it's definitely one of the ones that's, I feel, a little bit underrated in the scope of the Alyag project. Granted, I don't really get to play it out much just because it is so chill and ambient and very much unlike a lot of the stuff that I normally would produce under this project, with the exception, I guess, of the end bit that it blows up into. But essentially, its evolving arrangement was very much inspired by the circumstances under which Bex and I had met and connected at our favorite festival back in the day called Fozzy Fest. And the evolution of the arrangement and like all these elements blending in and how there's like kind of like tension rising and then sort of just the flow of the song essentially is inspired by that, by the feeling of a growing bond between two people that are very much drawn to one another, and like they could feel that there's a mutual attraction and there's a lot of like curiosity and playfulness, but also caution, you know, in those earlier stages of the connection. And the bit where it erupts at the end into like the heavy, like the metal drum and bass bit, essentially represents that moment that like where all the tension and everything else sort of culminates into this one special moment where all of those cautious, like unconfirmed feelings of like, is this a thing? Like, oh, this is very much a thing. Like, for example, like that could be your first kiss that really locks things in and you're like, all right, we're doing this sort of thing. And so yeah, essentially represents like the early stages of our relationship. So it's very special for those reasons, because I was thinking about all that quite a bit while I was writing it. Sonically, I always felt like it kind of reminds me of if there's like a collaboration between carbon-based life forms and maybe Pendulum or Blue Stolly or something like that. I don't know, but yeah, it's definitely very unique in its tonality and stuff. It also turned out to be one of the few tracks where, as I was digging through the hard drives and stuff and opening up old sessions, I realized, much to my great relief, that I'd actually properly exported and saved all the samples within it, because an issue that I ran into with the other two is that I'd open up the old session and then a whole bunch of files would be missing, or like just the directories were all screwed up from when I would like transition from computer or hard drive to computer or hard drive. But in this one, pretty much everything was there, with the exception of some old like software that I used to use. So it was cool to get to go and like remix it essentially from scratch, because I didn't have access to a bunch of the software anymore. I've used different stuff now, but most of the essential ingredients were there, with the exception of like I think the kick and the snare and a couple parts and whatever, but that was easy enough to replace those. The thing that I wanted to focus on in this remaster was the impact of the end section, because obviously it's a very powerful moment. In the original, it always felt like it kind of fell short a little bit, like it didn't quite have as much oomph to it. And so with this one, like the guitars are brought forward more, like there's just more punch to the drums and everything like that. Yeah, like I feel like it's a lot more powerful now. It just sounds to me like it always should have. So yeah, and beyond that, it was just some like minor rebalancing stuff and obviously remastering it in a different way than I did back then. Now I feel like it's finally reached the point where it's the track that it always deserved to be, kind of thing. So yeah, that is the Maybe-Gravies, and I guess as a final note, the reason why I chose that name for it. Originally, I wanted to call it, like, because it's obviously a play on the original album's title. Originally, I was thinking of calling it the Maybe-Yard of Gravy somethings, but I don't really know how to spell Maybe-Yard because it's not a word, and also it's too long. I don't know. And the Maybe-Gravies, it's just cheeky. It's fun. So yeah, that's the EP. I really hope you dig it. I know I had a blast rekindling and resurrecting these old tracks and putting some nice new polish onto them. And yeah, this allows them to have a bit of a spotlight again, with a little bit more of a backstory, explaining where they came from and why they are. As always, thanks for listening. Cheers.